So, hi Gunnar, welcome to Earhacks FM. And what I would like to know, of course, what was your first computer and how you started programming?
Oh, wow. Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for having me. So that's an interesting question. It's a long time ago. So I grew up in Eastern Germany, and I don't remember the exact brand, but it was something where we had your data on like a cassette, right? And you would have to load it and it would make weird noises. We played Tetris on this, so that's the stuff I remember, but it's really like long time ago.
Was it an Eastern computer?
Yes, I think so. Maybe it's some sort of copy of a Western make, but I'm not sure. It was connected to a TV, so it was all very basic, all very rudimentary. But we had some fun and we learned lots of interesting things.
Actually, I was in the University of Dresden, and this was in the year 2001 or something like this one time, and it was before the 9/11, or this was right. And funny enough, at the university, they did some research, no kidding, with WebLogic and Java and something like this. So they did some, and I had a talk with the prof, and he told me that back then they reverse engineered Western computers, and they created slices of the CPU to find out how it works. And and they replicated parts of that in building an Eastern computer. And I also forgot the name, so this would be actually interesting to know what was the name of your machine. So
maybe I can find out for another time.
Cool. And what was your first Hello World?
So the one thing I remember, I had a book, which I actually still have, about Pascal, and this was really how I got into programming. So I would, copy programs from this book, typing stuff, and the one thing I remember was there was a screensaver in it, so I typed all the program from the screensaver without really understanding what's going on, but in the end it worked, and I had some nice graphics on the screen, so this was really enjoyable.
Hey, cool. And how old were you?
So this must maybe 14, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, so you are pretty old already. So you started as a senior, I would say.
Right.
Cool. And why you did it?
I guess I just was curious about all the things you could do with the computer, and my father used to have one, so I was also looking into that a bit. So I guess I was just curious, and at some point I got a computer as a present by my grandparents, and this really was how I got started with all that, and just got the hang of it.
And your dad was a programmer?
Oh no, this was more a hobby thing.
Okay, but he could program, or just played with Winter Olympics?
He would program a little bit. He would do, back in the day, people built like their own custom database stuff to manage their books and these kinds of things. So I think that's what he did.
Lots of my guests actually created some kind of database in the early days of computing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it used to be like a common thing, right? I mean, actually, I did one for my comic books.
Hey, I think this is also the way how Larry Ellison started,
Oh, yeah. I see so.
Cool. And then you liked it or not? What was your path, to the first application? So you remember your first app you built, whatever it was?
So you mentioned the University of Dresden. That's actually where I was studying. So this was where it all got a bit more serious back then. I used to work as a student, how do you call it? As a working student, I guess, for AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. So I was working there. I was helping them with all their web-based training. So if someone wanted to go into the clean room, they had to take this web-based training. So this was some, of the first things more seriously I was working on.
Hey, cool.
Yeah.
And
definitely. I mean, this was a great time. So semiconductors. When you mentioned like those slicing of CPUs, it's all a super interesting area, very fast paced. So definitely great if you have the chance to just have a peek into this industry. It's super interesting.
So what you did on your Eastern computer, you created your first Hello World. Then you had some break, and then you started in university again.
Yeah, pretty much, right. So I if you wanted to sum it up, so I had this computer at Eastern Times, then I got a little bit disconnected, I guess. I started again with the Pascal stuff when I was a teenager, and then finally I went to university and started with Java, and then became a bit more serious.
Okay, so cool. So, and your first language was BASIC on the Eastern one?
To be honest, I don't know the programming language we used. Probably BASIC or something like that, I guess. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. So in the university, you did some AMD stuff and Pascal, and then immediately Java.
Right. So during the university, we pretty much focused on Java. There was a little bit of Prolog involved. But yeah, most of the things was in Java. This stuff I did for AMD, this was PHP actually.
Okay. And which version of Java was it?
Oh wow! I mean, this all goes far back. I guess it was 1.4, 1.5. So this
is actually fairly new. So
for you, I know you started with like 0. something, right?
Yeah. So no, I thought you started similar to me, So this is like, but you start later.
To be honest, maybe it was even 1.2.
I think 1.2 because 1.5 was like around 2005, I think. So this was way later.
Yeah. Then must have been a bit earlier. So one of the things I remember, we used to have this IDE Forte from back in the day. Yeah. So this was the thing we used, and then actually this new thing came out, which was named Eclipse. So we all were very excited about that. So yeah, this was pretty much the time when we started.
Oh, okay, perfect. And you like Java?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's still after all these years, it hits like the sweet spot of being, easy to get into. It's well readable. I mean, sometimes you feel it might be a bit too verbose, but to be honest, I'm not so concerned about this. To me, it's more about making code understandable, and there's tons of libraries. That's for me what's really important part. So we have a huge ecosystem of things we can reuse. We have, APIs and specs and libraries for everything.
But back then, if you your first look at Java, you thought is something special or just another programming language? Let's learn that and see what happens. Or what was your attitude back then?
I think probably more like that. It was like kind of a given in some courses at university. So yeah, I don't think I spent too much time thinking, hey, should I use Java? Should I use something else? It was really like what was there.
And then after university, so you spent some time at the university, wrote some applications because you had to. And what you did after university?
Right, so I went to a consultancy, and actually I'm not sure whether you remember or probably you don't remember, we even met back then, so this must have been like in 2006 or 2007, because you were coming to our consultancy and you were doing a Java EE5 course like for 3 days or so.
Yeah.
So this was actually the first time we met a very long time ago.
This is what I wanted to go with. So I remember this exactly. But
oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but the question is, when was it? Was it at the beginning of your career, or was it how long after university was it?
This was pretty much at the beginning. So it must have been like in the first or second year after I left university, because I worked at that consultancy for less than 3 years. So, it was very, very early in my career.
Okay, pretty cool. Because what I remember is this was a team of developers who really had fun. And the company was, I think, Saxonia, right?
Right, exactly. Saxonia Systems.
Yeah, Saxonia Systems. And I really had fun. And what we did was it was the architecture certification training.
Oh yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, remember you wanted to pass that. So what I remember is that you had also a colleague, and you had lots of fun. So we laughed a lot during the training.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
And then you ask me, you had an invention, something with annotations, and I look at that and I say, okay, this looks actually interesting. And you ask me, can I point whether I will link to your blog what I actually did? And then you were,
wow.
Yeah, and then you were really happy because some traffic happened, and I was like, but this was interesting, interesting invention you did. And then we met over and over again, and then you started to work with Red Hat. So this is what I remember exactly. And your colleague, you were really passionate what you did. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and this is why I remember this, because you said you were really into the training to Java 5, and you had some inventions. You asked me, what is my opinion about? I forgot. This was it the early versions of Dagger?
Oh, this could be. I mean, I did a blog post about Dagger. I was, I was very much interested in that. Maybe I've pointed you to that. I mean, it's really cool that you remember that, and apparently even better than I do. I didn't expect it because, I mean, you do tons of training class, so that's very, very nice that you remember that. I definitely, now that you say it was for this certificate, and there were all those fancy Java EE patterns like the, I don't know, what the fast lane reader and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was really, really cool stuff back in the day.
Yeah. And the background story was your company, for unknown reasons, they were into Spring back then, and they wanted to see whether Java EE is like productive or something like this, and they invited me for a test workshop. And the developers, if they saw this, how productive it is, I got hired for 1 year. I mean, not 1 year, training, but in the course of 1 year, I delivered lots of 1 or 2 day trainings. Yeah. And the developers didn't expect it, something like this, to say, this is incredible how productive it is. And keep in mind, this was Java E5, This was the dinosaur version where you sometimes even had to write, interfaces. And they liked it a lot. So, and then I bumped into you. This is one of the last trainings, because after this trainings, they got the idea to be certified as architect, whether I could deliver some certification course, what I did. This was the whole backstory.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, people were still burned by the old EJB, what was it, 2 stuff, right? And where it was like super cumbersome. Java E5 made a good progress. So I think that's where it started to be interesting again.
Because this is what I don't get, because the old EJB stuff, it is 2004. So it is 15 years old. I mean, we can talk the next 20 years about that, but this is like, it does not exist anymore. And exactly. I mean, we can also talk about Genie, or whatever, something which or Java Spaces or whatever was interesting 20 years ago. Okay, exactly. Perfect. So, what was your were your steps between the 2005 training we did after this? So, what you did, some projects, or what you did there?
Yeah. So I used to work before I joined Red Hat. I used to work at 2 other places. So one of them was Otto, the big e-commerce company, right? So I was working there on their backend systems for a while. And after that, I joined a logistics company, Kühne und Nagel. And I was working as a software architect for them a while. But then I already had began to contribute to Bean validation and Hibernate Validator. And at some point I had the chance to work full-time on this stuff and full-time on open source for Red Hat. And then I didn't really, think about it twice whether I should do this or not. And I was really happy to make this move into open source.
Yeah, which seems like you are still happy and doing more and more interesting projects.
Absolutely, yeah.
So about the Otto, they do some Java EE projects in Otto, reasonable ones. Yeah. And there is one guy, I forgot his last name, Bastian, but I interviewed him already on my blog. And they were really happy about Java EE and the lightweight stuff. Yeah. And so that's also interesting that you were at Otto as well. So Otto is like a small German Amazon, right? Something like this, right?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And lots of companies belong to them, which you might not realize, like Sportcheck or Schwab or About You. All those companies are a part somehow of the Otto universe. So there's much more than just Otto.de.
Okay.
It's a huge family of brands and companies.
Okay. And what also I was surprised, because from the beginning you were really skilled with Java, so this was your annotation stuff. We were always somehow this is my impression, interested in type safety Java and how you can push the limits. And still you like Java EE. So this is why always curious, because so sometimes people come to me and say, Java EE is dead and no more interesting or boring or whatever. Yeah. But what I see, more and more actually very young developers are really excited about Java EE. And that's the question also to you. Why you like that? And so why you're doing this? So you could do something else, but
So I mean, to be honest, I'm not too much hung up whether should you go for a Spring application or Java EE application or maybe get something else. You just use what what does the job best for you. maybe where you have the skills. So if it comes to Java EE or Jakarta EE, I think it's, most of those APIs really make sense. There's JPA, which is obviously super useful. There's something for REST web services. There's Bean validation. Lots of other things there. I mean, there's CDI, which I think is a really well thought out and very, very well defined and powerful spec. It's just a powerful set of specs. You can do the job with it. And so, that's why I like it, I guess.
So you're very pragmatic, actually.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely, I won't fight about these kinds of things, right? So if someone would use a different stack and that's what makes them most productive, well, sure, go for it, right? By all means, use what does the job best for you.
Yeah, the problem I have in my projects is I get asked now what we should do. So if I tell them, do whatever you like, this is not the answer they expect.
Oh, yeah. Sure. In your position.
This is the interesting part, yeah. I could actually advise do whatever, but what I usually do is you have already Java EE servers, so I can show you what you can do with that. And if you can show them what you can do with that, in 10 minutes, they say, we do this. Done.
Right.
And this is the short story why I spend all my time in Java EE projects. But if I were, how to call it, not consultant, rather than like a programmer for hire, I wouldn't care at all, because instead they could call it like do Spring for us or whatever, then I would just do whatever they like. And so this is interesting.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the one interesting thing is there's still lots of interesting initiatives happening, right? So I think you did a podcast with one of my colleagues on Quarkus, but I think this is like one of those interesting innovations where we are essentially using those APIs like CDI or like JPA, and essentially they just get to the next level by being able to run them on something like GraalVM. So I think that's also interesting that after all those years, there's still lots of innovation and space for making things even more productive and even better in ways which you maybe didn't perceive in a couple of years before.
Yeah, I had a discussion the other week about what's modern and innovation actually means, because in a project, someone asked me, can you show us something modern? And I'll say, okay, what do you expect modern? What does it mean to me? It should be like, crazy, or should it be not usable or productive, or because if you buy a car, I would like to have a modern car. What do you expect? That this is a self-driving car, or is it a car with lots of power, very fast, or very usable? So I don't like modern and innovation, because if you are in a professional project, what only counts is write software as fast as possible.
Exactly.
And after delivery, it should be as simple as possible, so everyone can understand what happens behind the scenes. And if you start with innovation and modern, and you would apply, let's say, quantum computing to create, read, update, delete, it would be very modern, but no one will get it. So this is,
I mean that's not a virtue just by itself, right? So you want to apply this to an end. So coming back to this native things again, I mean, this solves obviously a problem, right? So people in certain environments, they just need to have this very fast startup and so on. So that's something where this helps, but you don't do it just for its own sake.
But wait a second, because our audience doesn't even know what Quarkus is, so we have explained a little bit. But going back to modern, so you will also consultants in several companies before Red Hat. And my impression is that what happens in projects, developers would like to use something modern, regardless whether it is usable and suitable. And this is the common pattern. They go to conference, see your stuff and say, hey, we need, Debezium or whatever for our, Hello World application. And then and this is where it starts to begin to be crazy and absolutely unmaintainable. So this is what I wanted to say. So about innovation. So why I like Java EE is you download a server, let's say Whitefly, and then you are done. So the setup is done. And this is actually what I do meanwhile is I have a script which goes like curl download and unzip. So I delete the old server and install a new server before I do anything, because there could be some cache issues or whatever. And I have fresh installation, and the download is like 170 megs, the biggest Whitefly. And it is in seconds, and this unzip is even faster than it's installed. So it's very convenient to me. And then the setup is done. So this is actually what I'm really excited about. Whatever I may need in my project is already there. So no kidding, in 1 minute I have the whole environment. And definitely. This is innovation to me. So it's like Rails back then, you had one framework and everything was batteries included. So no, fiddling around and dependencies, everything is set up.
Yeah.
So, and this is basically why I like Java EE, period. And all the APIs are usable. They could be, of course, better integrated, some less redundancies between APIs, but I don't, I mean, okay, it can be always improved, but then I should contribute more and it could improve this is actually the story, right? So now, and then strange things happens with, micro profile, Payara Swarm, and Payara Micro and Whitefly Swarm. And I actually, and I never got Whitefly Swarm. So actually, I look at the page, and this was like right size services, or what it actually means, because all my services were they were never big, and the Whitefly full is actually not big and starts fast. So what they are talking about? And I measured the performance differences, and there were not a lot, and I completely ignored Whitefly Swarm because for me it was pointless, and I actually even asked people behind what is actually the use case of the Whitefly Swarm. Would you like to kill Whitefly or have different use cases, or I really don't get it. And so I just ignored Swarm and actually never saw Swarm in action in projects as well. And then Quarkus happened, right? So and I was like, okay, this is interesting. And Quarkus has a couple of true killer features, I would say. And this is something reasonable. A reasonable means I could actually go to a client and explain why they should use Quarkus, which was for me not possible with Swarm. And for the audience, so just quick explanation. What Quarkus is first it is, I would say, a capable Java subset of Java EE runtime. Let's say 80% or 70% of Jakarta EE plus microprofile. And this is a subset for a good reason we talk about later. And the output of the Quarkus thing is a jar, which is we could call it fat jar, but it isn't. This is the thing. This is an executable jar which you can launch. It's called Runner. And now comes the thing where I'm excited about. The jar is smallish, let's say, with everything included, about 200 kilobytes, but it points to parts of Whitefly. So what it means is we have a lib folder with all the dependencies which you usually would need, and you have the business logic in one jar, and dependencies in a lib folder. And
I mean, I wouldn't say it points to things from Whitefly, but let's say it points to those dependencies you're using, like those frameworks, Hibernate and Rest Easy and so on. Right?
Yeah, with Whitefly, I'm referring
to the set of stuff.
To already proven stuff.
Right.
So it's not like Quarkus is not like attempt from scratch to rebuild everything.
Right. No, it's
and because 2 days ago I was asked whether Quarkus can be used in production. Because, and I say, it actually uses proven technologies. What can happen, of course, there are some minor bugs, always can happen, but it's not like Quarkus comes with own HTTP server, own ORM mapper. This is, it just points to existing technologies. So this is important. And the cool story is, and this is like true innovation after Java EE, because in Java EE, you get the separation with deployment, right? So you have war, which is thin, it's just the business logic, and the server. And if you are working with clouds, let's say Kubernetes or OpenShift and so forth, so you would push the base layer, the server, once every 3 months. So every new Whitefly release, you will push it to the Docker registry. And the cool story is the war is tiny, so pushing the war is very fast. And the same works with Quarkus. This is actually, you get that out of the box. It's like deployment model on steroids, because on every Maven clean install, it only builds the business logic. The base layer remains the same, and you can push the lib to the clouds, which is incredibly fast. So this alone is one of the killer features why I think Quarkus is really interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, there's many more things to that, right?
This is the first killer feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never got the hang of those fat jars. As you say, it just doesn't really make sense if you have like layered container file systems. Yeah. So definitely splitting this up, is the way to go, right?
I get a lots of questions. People ask me about my opinion, fat jars or Uber jars, and my honest answer is, I really don't know what's the idea behind, because let's say in Quarkus, or Java is even more extreme. If you have a war with your business logic, the war will be tiny. So for Hello World, it's like 4K, and if you write more code, it will be probably 500K. But 1 meg business logic is I would say this is a huge project already. And the server is larger, but it is immutable. It only changes every 3 months.
Exactly. So you don't deploy this very often. I mean, you would deploy the stuff if you have a new version or you use new dependencies, but otherwise you would just keep those layers stable. That's also why I'm personally not super concerned about the total size of container images. Just focus on the size on the volatile images.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And so I mean, it never made sense this jar, the super jars, except if before Docker, but this is like 6 years ago. So if we would run the jars on bare metal, this is different story, because then you can copy one jar instead one zip and unzip. Then I see the point, but and if you see the ratio, even in Quarkus, I think if you build the full thing, the deployable would be like 20 megs or 30 megs, let's say. But still, if we build Hello World, we have 4K of changing logic. And comparing with 20 megs of immutable infrastructure, and just building the whole immutable infrastructure over and over again doesn't make any logical sense to me. And and therefore, I was also not interested, in the Swarm. Swarm supported HoloJar back then, which was similar. But just packaging everything as a Whitefly Swarm or Payara Micro, I never got the idea, except special cases like IoT devices and so forth, right?
Yeah, so I mean, you could make this work similarly with Thorntail Swarm, but admittedly it was way more complex in terms of setup. So it just gets easier with this particular thing gets much easier with Quarkus for sure.
And now comes the cool thing, because Quarkus knows all your dependencies, it can analyze them and build a native image. And the native image is kick-ass. So I would just start like in 1 milliseconds, right? And you get a specific, if you like, you get Docker file with it, and the Docker file within the Docker file, Quarkus is built. So this binary is a Linux binary, and the entire thing is like is small, but it is incredibly fast, and the RAM consumption is tiny.
Yeah,
it is like 4 or 5 megs instead of 200, 500 megs, and this is where I see, the point, because if someone claims Java is too heavyweight or consumes more memory, what they actually mean is Java is too heavyweight, because you cannot, save a lot of RAM with servers, right? Because if you compare Whitefly to Hello World Java, which I did in Java 1, you can save at most, 100 meg, or it's not impossible. So Whitefly consumes 40 megs RAM empty, so the full Whitefly full Java 8. And Java, if you start Java Hello World with a server socket without any dependencies, like 5-6 megs. So if you compare the heap usage, you can save 40 megs, which is, I mean, in project, if I go to projects like, look, we have 10 microservices, and if we use, custom Java build, and we will save 500 megs, the management will tell you are crazy. So, I mean, I will buy you an ice or something, right? It's like, I mean, this is completely crazy talk. But what I see with Quarkus, this is orders of magnitude.
Absolutely. And I mean, so you mentioned this story around native images. That's true. But also, I mean, you also can run Quarkus applications just on Hotspot and the traditional Java virtual machine, right? And also there, it's definitely more efficient. So it uses less memory and starts up faster than if you compare it to earlier stacks. And this is actually the one thing which I'm really most interested, or which I find most interesting and most innovative here is. So there's this idea of compile compile-time boot, right? So many of those frameworks, let's say Hibernate ORM or REST Easy, they need to do lots of things when they start up. So they need to find what are the entities of my application, what are my annotated web service or REST endpoints, and so on. So there's lots of things which used to happen at application startup, so at runtime. And the idea here now is that all this happens just once at the build time. So that's why it's called compile time boot, right? So this entity scanning and all those things, they are done at build time, and then essentially this information is baked into some data structure, let's say. So this means the application doesn't have to do it when it starts up because all the information is already there. And this also happens if you use a Quarkus application on Hotspot. So this is why I think it's both interesting if you go for the native approach, which gives you even less memory usage and so on. But just staying on the JVM, this already is like a huge improvement.
Yeah, and this is actually interesting because how Quarkus worked, it comes with own CDI implementation, which is subset of the full implementation. But Quarkus doesn't use reflection. So what happens is the whole dependency injection happens on compile time, which has interesting implication because usually EJBs are faster than CDI with injection because if you use normal application servers, and you inject stuff, right? EJBs are pulled. So let's say we have 5 EJBs. They are created once, and the whole injection tree happens once, which is in Java very slow. Also very slow is slow. Reflection is slow. And then it's cached. But if you would use request-scoped CDI, you get the injection over and over again, which is slower. But the cool story is it doesn't apply for Quarkus because everything is pre-compiled. It is always fast, regardless, whether it happens once. There is a small, probably not even measurable penalty, but the pooling doesn't make a lot of sense on Quarkus because dependency injection is not based on reflection.
Yeah, right. And also many classes just don't have to be loaded anymore, right? So let's say you are using some XML descriptor for configuring some framework, and in the Quarkus approach, this would happen once at compile time. So that's when the XML parser class that must be loaded and instantiated and so on. And then this information is there, so it's added to the application. And then if the application starts up, we don't need the XML parser anymore because we already have this information in our data structures. And this means, especially for the native image, we don't even have to take this XML parser infrastructure into this image. We just can strip it, right? Because we know this is never going to be used at application runtime.
And this is what I would call true innovation. Back to the definition.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I can use, my old programming model, which I used for 20 years, like CDI and ejection and whatever.
Right.
But behind the scenes, magic happens, and the whole stuff is leaner, faster, and more productive. And this would be innovation to me. Which doesn't mean innovation for me is like, back then what Hystrix did. I had to use, strange APIs to invoke one method which was guarded by a connection pool. So this was like strange programming model with a little bit innovation. And what MicroProfile does with one annotation, I get both. I get the same functionality with nice programming model.
Coming to MicroProfile, there's lots of interesting things happening, obviously, there, right? So the config API is useful, I would say, but also there's recently this reactive messaging API, which is pretty interesting if you interact with something like Kafka. So definitely there's lots of innovative things happening in MicroProfile, I would say.
But you mentioned now reactive. What's also interesting in reactive, they don't try to reinvent the wheel rather than create a provider for JDK 1.9 flow, right?
Yeah, exactly. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's always good.
But this is not what usually, if someone mentioned, modern innovation, this is somehow, show us some nice APIs, some newer APIs, and this this is for me just, do something new without a reason.
Right.
Cool. Yeah. You were involved with Quarkus? You're hacking?
No, not really. I just we had some talks about bean validation and the hybrid validator part of that. I used to work on that code base for a long time, so I was discussing this a little bit how it could be done. But otherwise, no, I'm focusing on mostly on Debezium, which is the project I'm working on.
Okay, but the bin validator extension is already available for Quarkus.
Exactly right. So this is already there. It's part of the Quarkus stack, so you can just use bin validation. Pretty much. I mean, some of the things are not supported yet, but most of the things you can use as you would have used them before.
What is not supported? You know that?
I was afraid you would ask. So I'm not sure. I think XML config might, for instance, not work if you are using the native mode. So everything is supported in the JVM mode, but some of these things are not, like XML, are not supported in the native mode.
What I did is, you could probably suspect what happened if I saw Quarkus. This week I released Quarky.
I saw about it. Yeah.
And what Quarky just is, I use it all the time. It's like, so what I did with Quarkus, so I did lots of proof of concepts for my clients. So I created a project, Quarkus project, and then I had a script, and the script did basically Maven Quarkus add extension and minus the extension. There are like 10 extensions which I always needed, and I said, this is just stupid. And what I did, I just created Quarkus once, then created a Maven archetype with all the extensions I needed, and released this as archetype. So now I can just say, my archetype, and it just creates the project with one health check, one ping, and all the dependencies I need all the time. And this is, I would say, pretty similar to Java EE server. So I have bin validation, I have all the microprofile stuff, of course. I have transactions. I have, I mean, it is still a subset, but it's good enough for me. As I actually, sky's the limit. What I just noticed that the Hibernate ORM does not support the native mode, right? So if you include ORM Hibernate, it won't compile to native.
No, this actually should work. There might be limitations around the specific database, but in general, this should actually work with native.
If I include the ORM Hibernate extension, it doesn't. So then I should find the bug. So without
if you have like a specific stack trace, definitely find the bug. The team is super responsive, and they will probably fix it in like 1 day.
Okay, cool. Okay, pretty interesting. So you also seem to like Quarkus. I also like because...
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, so I do lots of demos around Debezium, right? And one of the use cases there is data exchange between microservices. So I need some example microservices. And I began to port them to Quarkus and, just to see how it actually feels, because I also would like to gain experience. But also, it already helps me to... if I do changes to those examples, then actually I'm much faster, much quicker, because, the Quarkus has the development mode, for instance, which really is I just change some parts of the code, and then the application, without restarting, it will just have this change live. So this is a really cool thing, even for me to do.
Yeah, and one thing is lacking, but I wanted to either build it or propose it, but it's already proposed in April, so they are pretty fast. What I thought about this is you could actually store index files and CSS and JavaScript as static assets, and if Quarkus will reload them, this would be actually great for web development as well. So I also do a web development, so I could use the Quarkus as both backend and frontend server. And but right now it doesn't recognize the changes if you change HTML, so it won't reload. But this is a minor thing, and they're already working on a solution. I saw that Emmanuel Bernard contributed to the issues, and so
that's cool.
It's hard to contribute because they are faster than the bugs.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, obviously everybody in the team and in our group is really excited about this stuff, because it's just if I mean, you have seen it yourself. If you try it out for the first time and to see how well the stuff works, maybe you have been a bit skeptical before, and then you are really wow, okay, it's really like that productive. I change stuff. I have this dev mode. Have this super small image size. So it's really exciting for all of us.
And what's also interesting is, the developer experience, because if you start Quarkus, so it will suggest, in the terminal output what to do next. And if you list the extensions, you get the pointers to the guides. So it's also well documented. So the whole experience is really nice from the beginning. What is not, which is not given in such a young project.
Yeah, that's right, but I think it's really it's very experienced folks, right? You mentioned Emmanuel, who has been working on open source for many, many years, and lots of people like him. And they are obviously very aware of the fact that you need to have good docs and exactly this kind of thing, point to people to the right next thing to do and stuff like that. But it's just, otherwise, you will be just flooded by people asking for help in your forums and so on. So really, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. And, now, you also mentioned a project. I actually forgot the name. So you sent me this on Twitter. Is this like architecture validation project?
Oh, yeah, Deptective, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Deptective, that's like a small side project of mine. So it's not related to my work. It's something I do in the evenings. And the idea there is, so we have the Java module system, right? So which helps us, if we are using it, with organizing our code base in modules, and we can declare dependencies between them. So it gives us some structure. But then I felt I actually need some kind of architecture validation also on a lower level. So let's say I work on a library such as Hibernate Validator, which just essentially is a single module. And then still within this module, I have lots of packages, right? I might have 20 or 30 packages or something like that. And now the architecture within this module mostly is what are the dependencies between those packages, right? So is there like a layering or whatever I had in mind when I set up those packages? I would have a model in mind which describes, okay, this package, maybe, REST may call persistence, but not the other way around, because then you would have some sort of circle or whatever. So I figured it would be nice if we could enforce those dependencies amongst Java packages. And then the way Deptective is doing this is it hooks into the compiler and it enforces those rules at compile time. So essentially you define your intended package dependencies. So currently you're doing this in a JSON file, but that's just an implementation detail. It could be more, advanced, like a DSL or something. But so you describe the intended package dependencies, and then this Deptective compiler plugin, it will enforce those rules right at compilation. So this means if, for instance, your persistence package accesses the REST package and you didn't intend this, then you would have a compile error, right, at compilation time, right? And this gives you just a very fast turnaround time. So there are tools which help you with that, but they all work reactive, in retrospective, right? So usually they run on some sort of Sonar server or CI server once daily because it's too slow to run it all the time. And then people just tend to ignore this because, well, there's this reporting happening somewhere, and times get tough. They need to meet a deadline. So the first thing they will ignore is this kind of architecture reporting, which they might not even care about. And if this is part of the compilation, and actually this happens very, very fast, so there's not a noticeable overhead to this, then this, to me, the idea is just, this is a very natural and easy thing to do to keep your architecture in a same form. So that's the idea of Deptective in a nutshell.
Yeah, I took a look at that, and the idea is really good. What I like is that it happens at compile time. And what I apply on my projects is like the boundary control entity pattern, an old pattern which was reused from, I think, Ivar Jacobson or Grady Bush. And Ivar Jacobson. And I could absolutely use, your Deptective, for instance, to identify whether entities are accessing, for instance, the REST layer, right? As you say.
Exactly, right. Exactly. That's the idea. And so I was curious about this plugin, right? So this is a plugin of the Java C compiler. So it's not part of the public Java API. It's part of Java C, but you could implement something similarly for Eclipse and its compiler pretty easily, and it's on the roadmap. So I was curious about this API, so I wanted to learn about this, and this was then how I started with that. And then I figured, well, that's actually already useful for my own purposes. So I can use it, for instance, on another project I work on is MapStruct. So I applied Deptective to MapStruct to just see how does the architecture look like. And one of the modes it supports, so there's this validation, which I described, but you also can visualize your existing dependencies. So then it just analyzes your source code, and it can create an image using GraphViz, which shows you your dependencies amongst your packages. And for instance, there I spotted a circular dependency between two packages, which of course didn't really intended to have there. And the interesting thing is, this was caused. So I looked, what's happening there? What is causing this cycle there? And it turned out this was an import statement, which was on one of the classes. And the import statement, it just existed for the purposes of Java docs, right? So you can have imports to make like short names in your Java doc. And this was the only reason why this import was in this class. So I just could update the Java doc, just describe the concept there without referencing the type. And I could break up the cycle. And the only way I would find this kind of thing is really during compilation, because if you use other tools which work on the bytecode, imports don't exist at this level anymore, right? So you would not find out about this. So this was an interesting insight I just got by using Deptective, applying it to my code base, and taking a look at this image of the existing dependencies.
So what you learned from that is we shouldn't document too much with JavaDoc, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was wondering. So what is this now? I mean, is this a good thing? Yeah, definitely. In this case, it was definitely too much, and it shouldn't have cost
just fun. But I don't know what the Deptectives already do deliver, but what would interest me is the ratio. For instance, if I have two packages, let's say bands and songs, two packages, and every package is like a small component with boundary control entity. You know how often, for instance, bands package interacts with song package, just the number of references would be interesting to compute, the ratio between cohesion and coupling.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So this is actually something I added quite recently. So if you use this analysis mode to examine your existing code base, you see the numbers of those references amongst the packages. The idea being, if you have a cycle and you would break it up, and then probably if you have two references forth and back, and once the one of them is used like 2 times and the other one is used like 50 times, then probably the one which is used just 2 times is the one which you would look into to get rid of it, right? So that's the idea.
So I would see, the total number of interactions between two packages, right?
Exactly right.
So this is great. So I look at this, a few months or weeks ago, so it was not available, but if it's available now, I will take a fresh look on this, because this would be really useful in my projects. And now you mentioned cycles several times.
Yeah,
it's also interesting because you spend lots of time in building the platform itself, like bin validation, Debezium, or whatever, right? Right. And I spend my time in business projects, and in business projects, I don't care about cycles at all, because my bands and songs, they can cycle whatever they like, because you get cycles anyway. Because let's say if we have two entities, and one entity from bands knows the song and song knows the band, we have already a cycle. But this is important to mention, because what happens in some projects, so let's say higher level architects, they come from, like, they have the same thinking like you have from, platform level, and then say, hey, look, bands and songs, there is a cycle. Then we have to factor out entities in a different package. But if you do this, you cannot name the package, because if you name the package, what you can do, entities _ songs, it doesn't make any sense. And they name it like model entity, and then everything goes south, because no one can recognize what the application is actually doing.
No, I totally agree. So it's not that you should always get rid of any cycles. For me, it's just something to be aware of and take a look. So does it make sense? Are those two things, maybe should they be in the same package because they actually belong together, or is it not like that? So it's not, you should avoid this at all times, in my opinion. It's more some of the things to just be aware of. That's what I think.
Yeah, very good. So very good. And I would take a look. Then this is really useful. So if you also compute the ratio, or not the ratio, even just the raw numbers.
Yeah, just the number. I mean, take a look, and if something is missing, it's all open source, right? So
sure.
There have been people actually contributing to this already, which is cool. So when I shared it on Twitter, there was actually quite a good interest on people. Were liking the idea, and some people were adding some things. But the more the merrier, right? And I mean, the one thing what I was skeptical about is, so how performant is it, right? So this hooks into your compilation, so you don't want to bog down your compilation time. But for instance, I applied it to Hibernate Validator also, and this I think has like 800 classes, so it's not a huge code base, but it's not exactly small either. And there didn't change compilation time in any noticeable manner. So it was like 8 seconds or so with or without Detective. So this is also something I found very encouraging. So you just can apply this to your compilation by default, and it's just running there, and it gives you this insight in your dependencies.
Yeah, and also in your project like Debezium, is this somehow more likely, or it is more likely, then you will like to extract a package to a standalone
right.
module or jar.
Yeah.
In a business project, what we do, this will never happen because we only have wars, wars, which is like a microservice, and there are no jars in the wars. So there's absolutely pointless to try to extract something because no one cares about that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point you're saying. So that's definitely one of the use cases. If you want to extract stuff, you could use Detective to first of all see, is it even possible, or what are the places you need to look into, so you make those two subcomponents you have in mind to make them be able to be split up. Definitely.
On the quality note, I have another crazy idea which we should not reveal, should keep private. But Jacoco?
Oh yeah. The test coverage, right?
Yeah. And the test coverage is overused in larger companies, and just to get stupid statistics for unit tests. But what I thought about is, or what I actually do already is, I run Whitefly in Jacoco mode, run my system tests, and then get the Jacoco file and see the code coverage excluding Whitefly, and I see how much of the code was actually used I wrote, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I think what would be a great idea to create a module or extension for Quarkus, and then automate everything that you can launch, the Quarkus Jacoco code coverage, and then run the system tests. And then even cooler would be to have a REST endpoint, which outputs actually which parts were not called at all, just packages or classes or whatever, or even and if not that, then the raw Jacoco file where you can include to your IDE, and then you can delete that code.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, you could suggest it and see what the team thinks about it.
No, I thought you will say, "Hey, I have even more evening time. I will hack it next week." This was my expectation.
Yeah,
because the days are longer and longer. You are in Hamburg, so you can hack until 11. And okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things going on, right? I used to work on Mapstruct for a long time, which is a code generator for bean mapping code. Actually, I handed over this one to someone else because I was not really that much motivated to work on it, but also because I just it's lack of time and I wanted to focus on some other things. So you have to choose your battles.
Okay, and now in 3 minutes, what is Debezium?
Debezium, right. Okay, so it's cool you ask about it. So this is a very interesting project. It's a platform or tool for change data capture. So it means you have your data sitting in a database such as MySQL, Postgres, and so on. And now whenever something changes there, like a new record is created, new customer is created, or a purchase order is updated, or something is deleted, then Debezium would detect this change by essentially tapping into the transaction logs. So we would be aware of this change, and we would produce an event which describes the change, and we would send this event or this message to Apache Kafka. So in Kafka, you have topics with those change events, and they describe what has happening, has been happening, like for an update, what has been the old state of this row, what's the new state of this row, and then you can connect all kinds of existing consumers to use those events. So you could use it to, for instance, update your search index, right? So very often people use something like Solr or Elasticsearch to implement full text search for their Jakarta application or whatever application. So, of course, the data must be synchronized from the database to this search index. And so you could just use those change events in Debezium and then a connector for something like Elasticsearch to update the search index there. You could use it for updating or invalidating a cache, you could use those events to propagate change events or data between microservices. So
this is very similar what Emmanuel did, I think even 5 to 10 years ago with Hibernate Search, GMS. It was also similar. But so, higher level. I mean, you go to the database.
The use case was similar, but this so Hibernate Search. This really sits within the application.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff, right?
No, but the use case, high-level use case was similar. Okay,
exactly right.
And now the question to you, very important. Yeah. How you do this? Do you have a hook to Postgres? Is it a trigger or what is it?
Oh, yes. So it's not trigger based. It's really transparent to the application. And so the way it works is, pretty much all the databases have some way or some API which allows us to connect to it and to be notified about change events. So in case of Postgres, there's what's called logical decoding. So essentially we implement a plugin for this logical decoding API, and then this logical decoding plugin will send the changes to our Debezium connector, and we can then interpret them.
Because in Postgres, even with standard JDBC driver, you can be notified.
There's something like subscriptions, right? But the interesting thing is that all this also works, for instance, if some of the components are not running, right? So maybe you're updating the Debezium connector. So then when it gets restarted, it will continue to read the log from the point where it has left off before. So essentially it remembers how far it has processed the log. And then if it gets restarted, it will just continue from there. There's things like snapshotting, right? So very often if you start the connector, your database has been running for a long time, so you don't have the transaction logs from earlier times, and still you would like to have a consistent, complete set of the data, let's say, in the customers table. And so the connector can do a snapshot for you, which essentially just takes all the existing records from this table, produces like an insert event for them, and then it goes to the streaming mode and captures the changes from the log.
Mm-hmm. So, for me, so the killer features technically is like instead of polling the database, you find a way to hook into the database engine, which is very efficient, and you are receiving all the you are almost listening at the how do you call it, transactional log of the database, right?
Exactly. That's really the transaction log is the source of this. It's just we don't directly read like the log files, but there's some APIs which.
So then I would say Debezium is an adapter between the transactional log of the database and Kafka, right?
Exactly. You could say it like that, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So now, suggestion. We stop now and we record another podcast just about streaming architectures, Kafka and Debezium, because there's a lot of stuff. And now where people can find you on the internet, where can find your work, your blog, which I saw is very frequently updated, right? The last was for 2013.
So right. So actually, I got just one of those brand new dev domains. So I got that one, and I'm planning to have a new blog there, but it's not existing yet. So no, I mean you can find me on Twitter. So that's just my name, Gunnar Morling, on Twitter. That's I guess the best place to stay in touch. Mm-hmm. I occasionally blog on the Hibernate team blog in relation to relation.to. So you can find some things there. But yeah, I'm planning to revive a personal blog, so it's a bit more current than 2013.
Cool. And Debezium? Where to find Debezium?
All right. Yeah, Debezium. So that's all Debezium.io. So this has all the information there. We have user group, chat rooms. So all the links are there. We have a blog which discusses, applying Debezium for use cases like microservices and so on. All the source code is in GitHub, obviously. So everything is open source. But really, Debezium.io is the starting point.
And Debtective?
Debtective, this is this is also on GitHub. So there's a GitHub organization called Moditect. So this is another Modi-related tooling, and Debtective is under that organization. Moditect/Debtective.
Then thank you, and back to work, right?
All right, thank you so much, and looking forward to talking to you sometime soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.